It is July 27, 2025, and today I wanted to continue discussing crime in Cincinnati, specifically the murder of Patrick Heringer that occurred in the beginning of June. I'm concerned that Mr. Heringer's murder has been pushed aside, pushed to the back, because of all the other crime and violence that have been occurring in the city. And I don't really think that should happen. The city council, per the mayor, had a special meeting last week on the 23rd of June, or 23rd of July. And I guess the purpose of the meeting, as stated, was to give the city council members the opportunity to make inquiry of the chief of police and the city manager. So they were seated at the witness table. And the other thing that the mayor wanted was to get a motion passed containing 8 points that he thought needed to happen with respect to violence or crime. Two of the members weren't physically present. They had to participate via Zoom, Evan Nolan and Anna Albee. And as a result, they couldn't vote on the motion. But based on their remarks, they pretty much supported it. So it was another 9-0 situation, which I really do believe is part of the problem here, which is this all for one and one for all city council. And unfortunately, we came close, but we really didn't get a whole lot of tough questions the other day. For the first hour and a half, it was actually pretty boring and a lot of, posturing and whatnot. And it wasn't until an hour and 25 minutes into the meeting when it became Mr. Cramerdine and Mr. Walsh's turn to ask questions that we got anything that got a somewhat interesting response. And I will mention that in a minute. But soon after Mr. Heringer's murder, Sarah Heringer, Mr. Heringer's widow, went on social media. She's been very articulate, outspoken, but articulate, and was very, very smart in her public comments. Very surprising, given that the murder occurred just a few days before she posted this on Facebook. And these were her demands, and they're very reasonable demands. Number one, she's demanding a full timeline of parole and CPD failures. Number two, a public action plan from the mayor. Number three, a formal response from the chief of police. And number four, an audit of staffing and public safety enforcement. So all very reasonable demands. The first one is especially important and distinguishes Mr. Heringer's murder from all this other street crime and quasi-rioting that is going on. Mr. Heringer's murder, I think you can say it resulted from breakdowns in the system. And Ms. Heringer wants to know what broke down exactly, and sufficient information to find out why it broke down. She wants a full timeline of parole and CPD failures. Well, there were failures, and they do need to get to the bottom of it. And if you look at the mayor's 8 points on his little action plan here, none of those action plan items have anything to do or address in any way the murder of Patrick Heringer and what went on. She's demanding a breakdown of the breakdowns. And there were breakdowns. So what were they? Number one, there's a lot of confusion about the status of Mordecai Black, the person who has been charged with Mr. Heringer's murder. He was what they call a post-release control individual. It's no longer called parole. Now it's called post-release control. Well, there was no post-release control of Mr. Black. Mr. Black was walking around without any kind of control. He had cut off his ankle monitor. There were things that should have happened when that occurred, when he cut off his ankle monitor. There were notifications that should have gone out, but and actions that the police could have taken, but we don't really know what those are because nobody's going to look into those. They need to look into those. But there's very confusing information. So as soon as the city found out that it was the state's responsibility, once that ankle monitor was cut off, it was the state's responsibility to make notifications, and the city says they were never notified. Well, the state comes back and says, well, yeah, we put out a statewide notification or through our normal channels or something like that. I haven't heard where that's not accurate, that the state didn't do that. So they're pointing fingers at each other, and here the public and Ms. Heringer has to wonder what is really happening here. What went on? Then we find out that the Cincinnati police were called to the place where Mr. Black was staying after he was released, or while he was a post-release control individual, that they went there for a domestic violence complaint against Mr. Black. And he wasn't there, but apparently when they checked the system, they discovered that he had 6 parole violations. But what happened then? Who knows? Who knows what happened then? But that was a breakdown. You've got a post-release control person, a parolee basically, and he's got 6 violations. What was the follow-up? Did they call the Ohio, what do they call it? The Ohio, I can't remember the name of it, but it's a parole and corrections department. I don't know if they call it parole anymore, but the state agency that is responsible for the program, for the parole program. I think there might be a sub-office called the Adult Parole Authority, but they have offices. They have regional offices or around the state. Cincinnati is a region. It looks like there's probably in the area of, they've got all different kind of programs, but the post-release control numbers for the Cincinnati area 4 years ago, which is the latest data I could find, was almost 3,000, over 3,000 people who were post-release control individuals falling under responsibility of the Adult Parole Authority, which is part of the, I can't remember what it's called, but the Ohio Department of Corrections, basically. And they have a number of parole officers that are responsible for controlling these people post-release. Well, is there a protocol between the Cincinnati Police Department and the Adult Parole Authority? Do they coordinate on these kind of things? Apparently the Parole Authority, at least back in 21, they had people in different supervision levels, which is what the probation department in Hamilton County is trying to do now. But they had over 1,200 individuals that were considered very high or requiring very high or high supervision levels. I don't know, was Mordecai Black in that category? Do they still have those categories, and et cetera, et cetera? The point is that we don't know any of that, and we need to find out what that is. That in order to understand the breakdowns, you've got to investigate internally, and I don't see anybody asking for that. The mayor's 8 points, they're not responsive to Ms. Heringer's demands. He's got 8 points. 3 of them directly are about curfews for youth, and Mordecai Black is not a youth. He's a convicted felon. Number 4, they want to close the parks to youth between 9 p.m. and 9 a.m. Another point directed to the youth. They want to start, I guess, ranking parking lots and garages with respect to their safety, so at least people are warned that, if you park your car here, it's going to get broken into, and it's going to steal you. They're going to steal your guns out of your cars. And number 6, review and provide a recommendation for expanding the time and geographic footprint of the 21 plus permits at the banks. Again, Mordecai Black was not at the banks, and he was not younger than 21. Number 7, review and provide a recommendation for increased police visibility in OTR banks in downtown. So they have put a couple of cops on the beat, I guess, in OTR and I guess a couple of other areas they want to, or the mayor wants them to. And then finally, provide a review and timeline of the police lateral class. They're putting a lot of emphasis on this lateral class, which is another whole kettle of fish about why they have such chronic vacancies in the police department. My view was that they want to keep those vacancies there and replace them with mental health specialists and other counselor types and these community responders, that as long as they keep those vacancies there, they'll have money to hire these other people. And that's the mayor's 8-point plan, none of which is directly responsive to Mr. Heringer's murder. Even the thing about putting cops on the beat, that's only for the area around OTR that is south. North of Liberty Street, I don't think they're going to do anything which is more relevant to Mr. Heringer's murder. So that was, he wanted to get that done, so we called a special meeting. And so at the meeting, like I said, for an hour and 25 minutes, it was basically very, very boring and just platitudes and, complaints about the gun laws and all these irrelevant things. I mean, Mordecai Black didn't use a gun, he used a knife. And so, as far as I could tell, Mr. Heringer's murder, as far as the city council is concerned, is pushed to the back. They're talking about youth violence and gun violence and, things that are affecting their investment in the over the Rhine area in terms of our businesses down there. And that's, that we can't let that happen. We've got to keep Mr. Heringer's issue front and center, because there were government breakdowns there. And so an hour and 25 minutes into the meeting, it's Mr. Cramerty's turn to ask questions. And he asks a couple of questions, then he says, Mr. Cramerty, one of the things asked that I do hear from citizens is this perception that police officers are discouraged from enforcing certain laws. We were talking about the curfew, which is a great conversation, but expired tags is another one, that perception among the officers that they feel like they're discouraged from enforcing certain laws. So he's getting into the issue that everybody thinks is probably the case, that the police have basically been told to stand down on a lot of these enforcement issues. So here's Police Chief Theetge's response. I have heard this a couple of times in what I will categorize as rhetoric as well. So right away, it's all rhetoric, it's not true. I will tell you, from the moment I've sat in the chair, that is the police chief, during both the interim capacity and as the permanent police chief, that couldn't be further from the truth. And then she goes on, and this is, you have to listen very carefully to what she's saying. I encourage enforcement. It's not I encourage enforcement, period. I encourage enforcement if all else for compliance fails. So before the police can enforce the law, they have to try to get compliance with the law, which doesn't seem like, it doesn't seem like getting compliance with the law, it looks like it's too late. If you're looking to enforce the law, then it's already not in compliance. But anyway, whatever. And she says, if all else for compliance fails. And earlier she talked about this continuum where they try to get people to comply by, first they ask, nicely I guess, then they tell, a little less nice, and then they demand. And oh boy, they demand. And if after they get through the continuum, if the person that they're interacting with isn't in compliance, then it's okay to enforce the law. So if all else for compliance fails, I will back our officer. Many people have heard me say many times, as long as they are following their training, our policies and our procedures. So as long as they're doing everything right, no mistakes, everything has to be right, I'll back them up, which is a terrible thing for a law enforcement leader to say. She needs to back up her police officers and have a honest and thorough process if there are problems with their enforcement efforts. Then she goes on. She's laying it on the police, not on her. They, speaking of the police, have a lot of discretion. A lot of discretion as a law enforcement officer, and they need that discretion. I shouldn't be watching over their shoulder, so she can't watch it or monitor it. So I shouldn't be watching over their shoulder, well, she's probably not anyway, every single minute for every decision they are making, which is ridiculous. That's not what we're saying. If there is a belief that they are encouraged to not enforce something, that is not accurate. That is not accurate. They do have to work within the confines of some of the resources that they have. And then she goes on and says that, if they ask me to remove those confines when they occur, so that they can go out and enforce what they deem necessary, sometimes I do that. And then Mayor Furval chimes in. This is his cue to chime in. Mr. Cramerdine, if I could interrupt us briefly, building on Mr. Cramerdine's question, I too have heard this somewhat vague concern that we have somehow handcuffed police officers from doing their job. I just want to ask a direct question. Have I or any of the elected officials here directed you or asked you to tell police officers not to enforce certain laws? Chief Theetge, absolutely not. Very adamant. Not. Absolutely not. And then the mayor says thank you, and that's the end of it. And then Mr. Cramerdine says thank you. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Chief. And that was very clear, and I think that was necessary. Thank you both. Yeah, it was very clear that the chief of police is going to back up her police officers as long as, they're perfect. They follow all the rules exactly the way the rules are written. That's not what we need. We need to find out where the breakdowns occurred. So it's actually a matter that should probably be investigated at the state level. Since the parole authority is involved, it seems to me that the Attorney General or I don't know who else at the state level. There's a state inspector general. Perhaps the inspector general should come in from the state of Ohio and sort out the finger pointing that's going on. So in any event, the city should not be permitted to push this, under the rug, which is what they're planning to do. And we'll have to watch it, and hopefully we'll find some outlets for, Sarah Heringer and some of the other people that are making observations about the problem. Hopefully they'll be given a voice and continue to point out the problems that we have, because if we don't know where the breakdowns are, they're going to happen again. And I spent many years in the government in 2 different agencies. Both agencies had law enforcement components within the departments, and we had cognizance over them, and we would investigate those kind of breakdowns. In one case, in the case of the Office of Law Enforcement for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, their nickname was the Fish Cops. They go out and enforce all the fishing regulations that the government has to regulate the fishing industry. Who knew that the government counts the number of fish in the sea and then regulates how many fish can be caught? When I got there, I didn't believe it. Anyway, it's enforced by the Fish Cops. And we had a lot of complaints about the Fish Cops up in New England, and we went in and we turned the place upside down. I think the same thing needs to be done in Cincinnati. And, maybe we ought to start writing some letters to our state legislators, to the Attorney General, to the Inspector General, to find out what really occurred with the Mordecai Black situation. And I don't think that would interfere with any kind of prosecution. I think they can do that independently, and that's what should be done, and that is what the mayor should have asked for. So the good news is that I'm going to post a few things on the website, on the new website. I'm going to post a report by WCPO that was Paula Christensen did a report that was right on the button. I'm going to post that. I'm going to post some data from the Adult Parole Authority. I'll post the mayor's 8 points that he got in his motion, and and I'll post Sarah Heringer's Facebook post containing her demands. And if you want to see those, you can visit Cincinnati Watchdog.com. That is the new website for this podcast. And as I explained, the purpose of the website is to be able to share documents with the public that are discussed on the podcast. I've also loaded up my correspondence that I've sent into the city, and have received very little responses back, a couple of emails here and there maybe. And I'm going to post all the op-eds that I've had published, and have a little blog where I can post daily and refer back and forth between my Facebook posts and the website. So that's done, and that'll be launched with episode 25 here. And just keep in mind that we're still developing content and loading content on, but I think it's in a place that it'll be helpful to post some of these documents concerning Mr. Heringer's murder and what the city isn't doing about it. So until next time.